Phil and I have been married 40 years now. Have raised 3 sons, Jacob, Andrew, and Connor. I worked as a bra fitter. I like to say I uplift and support women for a living.
Millie is everybody's favorite person.
You know, I did things like Habitat for Humanity, or I worked with a program called the Davies Project, where I drove children to their doctor's appointments. I love that, and I love serving and helping people in the community. When Phil retired, we started traveling quite a bit, to the point where people would say, "Where are you going next?" I started experiencing what we ended up describing as goosebump moments. I would just have these momentary chills through my body. If you've ever had a goosebump, then you'd know what that is.
I called them momentary lapses because her face would go blank for a second or two. And then she'd come back and she'd say, "Oh, I just had another one." And when that happens 18 times in a day, I still feel guilty to this day that I didn't do something sooner.
One thing that we often forget about Pride is that it started as a reaction to police violence with the 1969 Stonewall riots. Pride was much more political. It was about ending police violence, about claiming rights. So Pride has evolved since it started in the US in 1970. And another thing that we see with Pride is that it has expanded not only from big cities to smaller towns in the US, but also globally. Hi, I'm Alejandra Marquez, and I'm an assistant professor of Spanish at Michigan State University. I study representations of gender and sexuality in Latin America. LGBTQ representation has shifted tremendously. I think it has made LGBTQ people more part of the culture, and there is also been a shift in Mexico, which is my area of study. One thing that is really big are telenovelas. Back in the 90s, it was completely unthinkable that there would be an LGBTQ character. Now, or the last 10 years or so, we see very complex LGBTQ characters. There is more acknowledgement of intersectionality, so how race or class play into that. However, that has also created more backlash and resistance, right? So I think that shows that visibility and representation doesn't necessarily end discrimination. It's important to keep a balance between remembering how it started and continuing to fight for LGBTQ rights. Just thinking about what the changes that I've seen in my lifetime, just being able to see people out in the street feeling joy and happiness. I think it's just important to see that community and to celebrate each other and understand that there is not one way of being part of the LGBTQ community.
One of the things that was happening in Detroit at the time that techno was being brought into being is that it was really facing a kind of transformation related to deindustrialization. Factories are leaving. That has really devastating effect in terms of economic outlook within the city. Techno is interesting because at some level, it really is being created in opposition to a broader national narrative about failure related to Detroit. Hi, my name is Julian Chambliss. I'm professor of English and a Val Behrman curator of history at the MSU Museum at Michigan State University. If we think about Detroit as a space of innovation, as a space where the mechanical is really central to everyday life, then the Black youth who are in that space are naturally going to process that mechanical, that electronic, that sort of transformation into the way that they project themselves. Techno is often identified as one of those foundational examples of what Afrofuturism is. When the term was coined, the cultural critic Mark Gary, one of the things he pointed to was sound. He pointed to music. It's an intersection of certain traits, cultural conversations. One is technology, one is performance, one is sort of lyric, the stories that the music is making. And in the case of techno, you can see all those things coming together. They're using the Roland 303. They're doing these performances that are creating communities of culture, right? Communities of cooperation and clubs, and the sort of stories that they're telling with the music of community, tell a story of transformation, tell a story of uplift, and all those things come together to make it an Afrofuturist sound. Techno was invented in Detroit by Black youth and nurtured in Black and queer spaces. And it is a music that speaks very deliberately about how Black people are thinking about a more positive future.
Everyone's scrolling. Give them a reason to stop. The reality is that US adults spend nearly 8 hours a day on digital media. So that's why we turn up the volume and hit record for those who want to be heard. More than just content creators, we're the sound engineers of your brand, whether that's at our house or we come to yours. And our writers understand every audience, including search engines. Plus, our video and social content is an algorithm's dream. Fresh ideas, intentional design, a team that gets it, gets you. Say more. Content that speaks volumes.